Around Halloween one year, developmental psychologist Jacqueline Woolley and colleagues told a bunch of preschoolers about the candy witch, a nice witch who eats candy for every meal. To satisfy the habit, she flies between children's houses on Halloween night and takes the candy children have collected while trick-or-treating and replaces it with a new toy. Later, Woolley asked the kids whether they thought the candy witch was real or pretend, or if they were unsure. Around two-thirds of the children were convinced that the candy witch was real. Only a quarter were sure she was made up. The remaining few couldn't decide. Children's apparent gullibility led some psychologists to see kids as innately magical thinkers, basically unable to distinguish reality from imagination. Jean Piaget, an influential early developmental psychologist, argued that children simply don't have the cognitive ability to tell the difference between their own thoughts and the outside world. If kids can imagine something, according to this view, they assume it's real. Skepticism, one psychologist suggested more recently, is an adult characteristic acquired, if at all, with age. Well, it turns out kids aren't as dumb as all that magical stuff makes it sound. Recent research, much of it by Jacqueline Woolley, the developmental psychologist behind the Candy Witch, reveals that children think a lot about what's real and what's not, making an effort to distinguish reality from magic and make-believe. Rather than believing anything and everything, sometimes kids can be too skeptical. It's asking a lot, after all, to expect kids to know that dinosaurs and knights are real, but dragons and wizards aren't. Young kids often struggle with the distinctions, rejecting the reality of dinosaurs, for example, because I've never seen one. In one study, 3-year-olds commonly dismissed Michael Jordan as a fictitious being, presumably because they knew most of the things they saw on television were not real. And children make use of some surprisingly sophisticated strategies to evaluate evidence. Children even realize that they should put more stock in claims that appear to have scientific validation. In one study, researchers made up something called a cernit. By way of explanation, they told kids either that dragons like to catch them, or that scientists like to try to catch them. Kids were more likely to believe the latter. That children often end up believing nonsense is less a testament to their innate credulity or lack of reasoning skills than to that someone is actively deceiving them, which would be grown-ups. Where we end up believing nonsense, it's often as much a product of active deception by the people we trust as of our limited cognitive abilities. So why do children believe in things like Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, the Candy Witch, etc.? Well, it's because they're trusting adults to be accurate and reliable sources of information. They don't expect adults to lie to and deceive them. The source of the information for this video was brought to you by Rob Brotherton from his book Bad News, pages 242 to 247. I would highly suggest you read his entire book. It is very informative and interesting.